When I came home that evening, the apartment key wouldn't turn. My nameplate, Denny Hartman, was gone from the door, replaced by a shiny new tag that said Marie Hartman, my sister's name. I knocked once, twice. The door opened, and she stood there in yoga clothes like she'd always lived there. "Oh," she said, pretending to be surprised. "Mom and Dad didn't tell you?" Before you scroll, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and make sure you subscribe, because the way this story turns will make every jealous sibling story you've ever heard feel small. I looked past her into the place I'd designed from scratch, the wooden bookshelves, the plant wall, the piano my grandfather left me. She'd already moved her furniture in, mine pushed against the walls. "Tell me what exactly they didn't tell me," I asked slowly. Mom appeared behind her, holding a stack of mail. "Honey, don't be dramatic. We needed to move things around. You were hardly here, and Marie's lease was ending." "You what?" I whispered. Dad stepped in beside her, tone practiced and calm. "We decided to sell the apartment to Marie. She'll make better use of it. You have your job, your own life." "I paid the mortgage," I interrupted, "every month, from my salary." "Technically," he said, glancing at his shoes, "the deed was in our name." It felt like the floor tilted beneath me. Years of sacrifices, double shifts, skipped vacations, all turned into technically. Marie shrugged, holding out a sympathy smile. "Don't be upset, Denny. You always get so emotional about space. It's just walls and floors." No, it wasn't. It was the first place where I felt safe. And now the girl who took it smiled like she was doing me a favor. Something inside me snapped, not loudly, not angrily, but quietly, like a glass cracking from too much pressure. I turned to Mom and Dad and said, "Okay, enjoy your decision." Because I knew one thing, they'd just traded a home for a lesson, and I was about to teach it to them in a way none of them would forget. 2 weeks later, I watched their faces scan the crowd at my sister's housewarming party, all proud smiles and gossip-thick laughter. Marie floated from guest to guest, showing off my balcony view, my kitchen counters, and pretending she'd earned it with her charm. She was glowing. They all were. I stayed invisible in a corner, sipping water instead of the champagne I'd bought when the apartment used to belong to me. Before we go any further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and hit subscribe, because what happened that night turned their perfect moment into the kind of silence you can still hear years later. Marie spotted me, surprised. "Oh, you came," she said, like I was a fan walking into her concert. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied. Mom linked her arm through mine, whispering, "You're happy for her, right? She deserves a fresh start." "Of course," I said, smiling. "So do I." The next morning, I began quietly calling everyone I knew, contractors, movers, and a developer friend who owed me a favor. Over the months, I'd saved every pay raise, every bonus from my design firm. I poured all of it into a single project. I bought the building next door. But this wasn't revenge through money. It was revenge through experience. The same way they made me feel invisible, I'd make Marie see what being unseen truly felt like. Construction started the next week. Scaffolding, drilling, the hum of power saws from sunrise till dark. The walls trembled, the view she loved, blocked by my new glass extension. The peace she bragged about, gone. One night, around midnight, she called me. "Denny, you have to stop this. They said the renovation was temporary." I let a moment of quiet hang and then answered softly, "You said it was just walls and floors, remember?" "You're being cruel." "No," I said. "I'm showing you how it feels when something you built, the space you paid for with your own effort, is treated like it's replaceable." She didn't reply. Only the sound of her breath catching. It wasn't enough to watch her shaken, though. I wanted them all to see the difference between owning something and earning it. So I invited the entire family to dinner a month later, not at a restaurant, but in the top floor of my newly finished loft next door. I kept the curtains open so they'd have a perfect view of the balcony Marie used to boast about. She came in pale, quieter than usual. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "It's mine," I replied, smiling without bitterness. "It's always been mine. It just took me losing the first one to remember what that means." Mom tried to speak, but I stopped her. Don't apologize. This isn't punishment. It's perspective. That night, as they left, I caught my father staring out the window toward Marie's apartment, now wrapped in construction cloth, half in shadow. He looked smaller somehow. Sometimes justice doesn't shout, it echoes. They heard it in every hammer strike that built my new home from the ground up, one decision at a time. A month later, I got the call I'd been expecting. Marie's voice trembled through the line, the background full of drilling and shouting. Denny, I can't live like this anymore. The noise, the dust, even my clients stopped coming for home shoots. What do you want me to do? Before I tell you what I said, tell me where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel, because this is the part where regret hits harder than revenge ever could. I leaned back in my chair, watching sunset light shimmer across the tall glass of my own building. I don't want you to do anything, I said calmly. I just want you to understand that you never asked me what that apartment meant to me. That's how easy you erased it. She was silent for a long time, then whispered, I didn't mean to hurt you. I know, I said. You just didn't care not to. 2 weeks later, she texted again, listing the apartment. I'm moving out. The same day, my parents called. Mom, quieter now, said, She's selling it back to you at a loss just to escape the mess. You've made your point. Are you happy? For a moment, I didn't answer. Then I surprised her. Yes, but not for the reason you think. That weekend, I went to sign the papers. The realtor blinked at me. The place has good bones, one owner, minor cosmetic wear. Minor wear meant the walls rattled when wind hit the scaffolding. I smiled. I'll take it, I said. By the time I stood inside again, dust layering the shelves, it felt different. It wasn't nostalgia anymore. It was closure. I looked around the empty living room, the faint mark on the wall where my piano used to sit. My parents had taken away a place. I'd built a life. The balance finally made sense. Months passed. The new building next door thrived with tenants and my design studio on the top floor. Marie moved into a small apartment downtown, this time paying every cent herself. And somehow, through the strange honesty of losing and rebuilding, we even started talking again. One evening, she brought coffee to my studio. You win, she said softly. It was never a competition, I answered. It was a call and response. We shared a quiet laugh. When she left, I walked to my balcony, the one that faced hers. For the first time, the city lights reflected equally on both sides. Maybe that's what real victory looks like, not making them pay, but making them understand. And as I shut the window against the cool night air, I realized I no longer wanted them to regret anything. I just wanted them to remember that sometimes the walls we fight over are just a test to see who can rebuild without losing themselves. Spring came early that year, and for the first time in a long time, every window in my building stood open. The sound of the city rolled through. Traffic hum, music from the cafe across the street, bits of everyday life that had nothing to do with rivalry or revenge. I was planting mint and basil in little pots on the balcony when I saw my parents standing on the sidewalk below. They looked uncomfortable in weather too warm for excuses. Dad waved once, hesitant, while Mom clutched a small paper bag like it held their last apology. Before I tell you what happened, leave a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe, because this ending isn't about revenge anymore. It's about what comes after you finally win. When they reached the top floor, Mom didn't speak. She simply pressed the paper bag into my hand. Inside was a key, the key from my old apartment. My old nameplate, too, the one that had read Denny Hartman. Someone had polished it. Mom's voice trembled. It was wrong, what we did. We thought helping your sister wasn't hurting you. Dad nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. We watched you rebuild everything, and somehow you did it without destroying us. I don't know how to thank you for that. For a second, I didn't know what to say. The anger I'd held for months had cooled into something quieter. You can't thank me, I said finally, setting the key on the counter. You can just remember. We stood there in silence until Mom took a deep breath and smiled weakly. You've made a beautiful place here, Denny. You always did know how to make things feel like home." When they left, the air felt lighter. I looked down at the key again, at how small it suddenly seemed. I tucked it into a drawer, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. That evening, Marie stopped by. She looked happier, working again, full of different stories. "So," she said, glancing at the herbs by the window, "does the great Denny forgive her foolish family yet?" I laughed. "Forgive? Yes," I said. "Forget? Never. This building is what forgetting looks like." We stood side by side, watching dusk settle on the skyline. The lights flipped on one by one, coloring the glass like warmth returning after winter. What started as bitterness had become something else entirely. My parents learned humility, Marie learned empathy, and I learned that peace doesn't come from payback. It comes when you know you can rise again even if everything's taken from you. And maybe that's the quietest revenge of all. Living in the home they once stole, not to prove them wrong, but to remind myself that I was right to fight for it. A year later, the apartment no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt alive again. The walls that once echoed with bitterness now carried laughter, music, and the smell of strong coffee. I'd turned the second bedroom into a design studio, and business was taking off. What had once been my dream space was now something better, a symbol that even betrayal couldn't bury me. One afternoon, Marie came by carrying a box of pastries and 2 steaming cups of espresso. "For the record," she said, setting them on the counter, "I finally bought my own apartment. My name, my down payment, my walls." I smiled. "Feels different when it's yours, doesn't it?" She nodded with that honest older sister humility I'd waited so long to see. "You know, I used to think you wanted revenge," she said. "But you were just trying to make me understand." "Understanding lasts longer than revenge," I replied. "That's why it hurts less." Before we move ahead, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe, because sometimes stories don't end with anger, they end with growth, and that's where this one finally found peace. A week later, Mom and Dad invited both of us to dinner. The same restaurant where we'd had every tense family gathering, but this time, no rehearsed smiles. Just a quiet table, simple food, and something that had been missing for years: sincerity. Midway through dessert, Dad raised his glass. "To Denny," he said softly, "for teaching us what value means. It's not the deed or the walls. It's believing something's worth rebuilding." For once, I didn't look away. "To family," I said, "the kind that learns." That night, the street outside glowed gold beneath the lamplights as I walked home. From my balcony, I could still see the faint outline of Marie's old apartment next door, the one that started it all. But instead of anger, I felt gratitude. None of the pain was wasted. It turned into everything solid under my feet. I pushed open my window, letting in the city air. Somewhere below, a new tenant was moving into her first apartment, laughing with the same nervous excitement I had years ago. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't trying to make anyone regret anymore. I just wanted them, and myself, to remember that losing something isn't always the end. Sometimes it's just the beginning of claiming your own space in the world. Summer sunlight poured through the tall windows, flooding every corner of my apartment in gold. The same place that once held my heartbreak now felt like a promise to myself. There were no boxes to unpack, no lessons left unfinished, just peace and purpose breathing through the walls. I'd stopped waiting for anyone to apologize, stopped needing anyone to notice. Marie dropped by occasionally, arms full of flowers or fabric samples. My parents visited on Sundays, bringing fresh bread instead of opinions. We talked about simple things, the way life should have always been, without tiptoeing around old wounds. I realized that sometimes forgiveness isn't a moment, it's a rhythm, something you practice quietly until it finally feels natural. Before I close this chapter, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe, because endings like this don't come easy. They're built piece by piece, just like the lives we rebuild from loss. That evening, I sat on the balcony watching the city lights spark alive. My phone buzzed with a message from Marie. "Dinner at my new place tonight? I finally cooked something edible." I smiled, typed back, "Wouldn't miss it." I glanced around my home one more time. The home they once tried to take, the dream they'd sold off like another piece of furniture. It had become my canvas, my proof that strength doesn't shout. It endures. As the night breeze lifted the curtains, I whispered to myself, they sold walls and floors, but I kept the foundation. And that was the truth my family finally learned. The sweetest revenge isn't watching someone lose what they took. It's living so fully that they see what they can never take back again.